Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar from beehiiv, Growth on Autopilot, Secrets to Scaling Your Newsletter with Automation. Thank you so much for being here today. We're very excited to be able to share some time with you, share this knowledge and these tips for success. It's an honor to have everyone join us and share your time with us. We're very excited for this webinar. Automations and scaling kind of in an automated way is one of the things we get so many questions about, can be very impactful to the growth of a newsletter, to forming the user journey, the user experience. And so I have no doubt that this is going to be very, very helpful to a lot of people. So in today's webinar, what we're going to cover is automating with onboarding sequences, setting up drip campaigns, nurturing subscribers, personalizing at scale, automating your newsletter. And actually a late addition to this was 4 different playbooks that we outlined step by step for you to swipe and implement, more or less immediately. Without further ado, we'll get into it. If you've come to our other webinars, you'll recognize this slide. We start out every webinar kind of with this groundwork slide. If you're new, this will be helpful. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about today, it's so important that we have a little bit of groundwork, that we're all working from this, from the same space. You can think of this kind of like prerequisites, and we have Marketing Max in the mix. Hey, Max, how's it going? Cool.
All is good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just getting started. You haven't missed anything. So in terms of groundwork, so the first thing is understanding your audience. We really can't stress this enough, which is why we stress it at the beginning of all of these sessions. Understanding who your audience is, who you're writing to, is one of the really critical, essential steps to success with a newsletter. There's a podcast that's really, really influential in my thinking from Sean Purry and the guys over at My First Million, where they talk about building a writing habit. And one of the exercises is to really, when you are writing a newsletter or writing for yourself, think about just one person that you're writing to. Try to visualize who exactly that person is. What do they do for work? Where do they spend their time online? What interests them? What excites them? What problems do they have that they're maybe seeking solutions to? And that exercise can be valuable more so than thinking about, okay, there's a group of people I'm trying to talk to, or I'm trying to serve the needs of maybe 5 different people. When you start to kind of dilute the focus of who you're writing to in that way, it becomes less impactful, and typically that can show. So understand who it is that your audience is, where they spend their time online, where they focus their attention. All of these things all go into really having a clear idea of how to provide value. At the end of the day, your newsletter is going to get engagement. It's going to be valuable if it provides value. Little tautology right there. But that all comes from understanding who it is that is consuming the content and whose attention you're capturing. The second is consistency. Similar to, the first step, publishing consistently, whether that's daily, weekly, bi-weekly, setting up some sort of consistent schedule is another kind of baseline that you need to have kind of locked down. People are not going to be invested in showing up and opening your email week after week if they don't come to expect it. Or put differently, they're not going to give you their time and attention, and at best, they're not going to give you their money if they don't know that they're going to get the value back and that relationship is going to continue. Everybody wants to invest in an ongoing relationship that's going to last for some time, and this is specifically relevant to the topic of automation because it helps actually with some of that consistency. This should be something where you kind of set a habit for yourself. I'm going to publish every Wednesday, every Thursday, whatever day. I'm going to make sure that that goes out week after week. And by holding yourself accountable to that, building that habit, you will find yourself to be much more consistent. It doesn't have to be weekly. It can be bi-weekly. It can be whatever frequency. Just set that expectation with your audience and stick to it. The third one, and this is not necessarily as essential as the previous 2, but it is very helpful and it is important, but understanding the niche that you fill. So this is almost a product of the first 2, and that if you understand your audience and you have a consistent publishing schedule, those basically kind of filter down to who are you, what is the audience, what is the niche that you're trying to fill. So in terms of knowing your audience, you may know who that person is that you're trying to reach, but the niche is more what is the angle that you're approaching this problem from. What is the unique perspective that you bring to the table? If you are in the cooking space, there's a million cooking blogs, there's a million recipe sites. What is the niche that is going to really separate you? Are you going to be a recipe cooking newsletter for people who are gluten-free, dairy-free, and pescatarian, like my girlfriend? That'd be a very, very specific niche, and you'd probably have a lot of success because there's actually way more of those people out there than you'd think. Maybe you need to go more niche. Getting that specific is really, really helpful because, again, it's a product of that audience. If I was trying to write a newsletter to her, I would understand that that is something that's very important in providing recipes that, can fill that need for variety, in terms of cooking, could solve a problem that lots of people have, or, a significant number of people have. And ultimately, when you have that niche, if you're thinking about advertising or monetizing, that niche can provide a lot of value. If you get really, really narrow with who your audience is, your audience becomes far more attractive to advertisers because they have a very clear idea of who it is that their advertising is reaching. And we're actually going to go into some of that, how you can determine your audience in some of the slides to come. Before we continue, Max, do you have anything to add there? Any variation to what I've just said?
I agree with everything you just said, and I would just use myself as a case study. When I first started my newsletter, my evening newsletter goes out to about 120,000 people now. But when I first started the morning one, was just focused on marketers. I was not niche. I just said all marketers and anyone interested in marketing, and it made it really, really, really hard to identify who the ideal advertisers were, because the advertisers would ask us who your audience is. And if we say all marketers, well, they want to reach marketers of tech companies, or they want to reach marketers of real estate companies, or whatever that might be. So the more niche you are, the easier it is to create content that resonates with your audience. And so I would just use myself as an example. Like, we've really honed in on who our core target subscriber audience is, and it's made everything else in our business 40 million times easier.
Amazing. Yeah. That's why we have you here. It's great to have those real life, examples to be able to pull from for the audience. Excellent. So moving forward, we'll start from the very beginning. When users first are coming into your newsletter, onboarding sequences are crucial because they help you make a strong first impression and immediately engage those new subscribers. With beehiiv, there's a couple ways you can set up automated welcome emails that are triggered, by that act of signing up. By default, every account has a welcome email that you can set up in the settings. And then if you are a paid user, we have our full-fledged automation suite, which does allow for, far more, almost infinitely complex automations to progress from there. So with future kind of conversations on this call about automations, we're going to really be speaking probably more to that more advanced use case and within the automation suite. But if you are on the free plan, you're just getting started, you're finding your feet, there's no excuse in that you have a welcome email that you can send to your users. In that email, that first email, if you have a multi-step series, that first email should really introduce the brand, explain what they can expect, and ideally provide some sort of call to action to immediately get them engaged. There's two reasons for this. One, that engagement creates that habit of, basically interacting with your newsletter and creating some page views and engagement and signals. But when somebody clicks on emails in their inbox, it's a signal that you are a trustworthy sender and that they're engaged. If you open an email, that's obviously good, but if you click through, that it can be even better because it shows that you have some sort of meaningful content that was worth being clicked on. So it can help deliverability. So aside from kind of the initial call to action, setting the expectation, this is where you could talk about how often you're going to be sending stuff to them. It would be like, you can expect to receive, daily, weekly emails from me, what have you. If you're ready to start, looking at past content, click here for some of the top, my favorite articles that I've written. There's a bunch of things you can do to basically, promote that call to action. And we'll get into some more tactical ones in terms of things like offering resources and assets, later in the talk. But, that's kind of initially how you can do it. The other good one would be calling them to follow you on socials. So socials are a key component of distribution for newsletters. It's a great way to test and iterate. If you followed some of our past webinars, if you're sending weekly, you have 1 out of 7 chances. You have one time a week to really kind of collect data on what resonates with your audience. On socials, it's a free way that you can do more rapid iteration. If you're posting on Twitter, you can post 4, 5, 6 times a day and see what really excites your users and use that kind of data to kind of, refine who that audience is that you're reaching and to potentially reach new customers. So getting people to follow you on socials is kind of a key thing there. After that initial first email, if you have the ability to set up subsequent emails, we recommend something, 3 to 5 email sequences to keep them engaged over the first days. This is especially important if you are running a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter. If you're running a daily, maybe that's not as useful because you're going to be talking to them the next day. But, if somebody subscribes on a Tuesday and you send out on Monday, they could go 6 or 7 days without hearing from you. And so timing that sequence and that follow-up can be really, really helpful for getting them kind of engaged. And of course, you can't control when someone's going to sign up. So there are some tools you can use within beehiiv to, basically wait till certain times of day, wait until certain moments to send those messages. And ultimately, if you do overlap a little bit, it's not the end of the world as long as you are providing value with those subsequent emails. If they end up getting the 4th email in your series the same day as they get, the next edition of your newsletter, no harm, no foul. But yeah, you want to start with that welcome, really start training them to expect you in the inbox, start training those signals for their ESP. Everybody's inbox is totally customized to them at this point. So creating those signals for Google or whatever email provider they're using, Apple, to see that they are continuously opening emails from you can be very, very helpful for deliverability. But ultimately, this form of automation may be somewhat obvious to some people, maybe not, but it's really, really helpful in those early stages, those critical early moments when somebody maybe just discovering you to really build that relationship.
Yeah, just a few pro tips. Having sent out literally millions of emails and over 100,000 welcome emails, is everything EJ said is spot on. We find that if you give people an incentive for all of the things that you want them to do in the welcome flow, you're going to see 10x more responses and 10x more of the actions you want them to take. So for example, to EJ's point, right, it's really important to signal to Google, or it's really important to signal to Apple or all of these different email service providers that or I guess they're not email service providers, they're email like inbox tools or email inboxes, but it's important to signal to them that you are a friend and someone that they should expect emails from regularly. And so the first thing we do in our very first emails, we say, hey, please respond to this email to warm up your inbox to our domain and our IP. And if you respond with your biggest marketing challenge right now, you get entered to win a $500 Amazon gift card. So incentivizing them to do it doesn't have to be a $500 Amazon gift card, but that works really well. That's the first email. And then the second email is what EJ said, like we call it our greatest hits. So we kind of make it musical theme. We have like a rock hand sign emoji and we say our greatest hits. So here's our top 5 sends that we've ever sent. And then the third one is trying to get them to follow us on social. And then again, we incentivize them by saying, hey, follow us on social and send us a DM and we'll send you like this white paper we have, or this ebook we have, this like digital download we have about 5 growth marketing strategies or 5 growth marketing tactics you can use. So like the more you can incentivize people to do the things that you want them to do, you're going to see 10x more results and 10x more actions that you want them to take. So just always remember, like even in the simplest and smallest of ways, how can we get more people to be incentivized to do this?
Amazing. And I'm kicking myself a little bit now because when I was putting together the tools that you can use outside of beehiiv to stitch together some of these other experiences, I completely blanked on adding some of these social media optimizations. Do you use a tool to automate that response if they DM you, or is it all manual responses? There are some tools like Hype Fury that we can link to in the notes that allow you to automatically send something if somebody DMs you, which would be a great automation tool to include. Curious your guys' approach.
Yeah, we use ManyChat, it's called, for Instagram.
Yep.
For Instagram.
Yep.
I don't know
That's
if Hype Fury has any feature, but what ManyChat does is it allows us to say, if in our email it says like, or DM us on Instagram the word new or subscriber, if like we set up an automation in ManyChat where it says if they DM us subscriber, automatically send them this digital download. I don't know if that's available in Hype Fury, but if it is, I should look into it.
I don't think it is for Instagram, but that they have very similar functionality for X, Twitter. But yeah, Instagram we use ManyChat as well for our social media manager does many things like that to say, hey, we'll send you this guide or whatever if you comment on a post. So great call out. We'll include links to ManyChat and Hype Fury in the follow-up. So moving on to slide 2, we use the word drip campaign. What we mean is, there's a lot of different words. There's autoresponder, drip campaign, automation. These all mean the same thing. They're all synonyms for the same process. And the welcome series that we just talked about is a version of a drip campaign. But you may want to set up additional automations to engage subscribers, at different points in the journey, not just when they sign up. And that's what we're talking about when we say setting up these other drip campaigns. There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can set up drip campaigns to nurture subscribers over time. So just to check in, say, hey, how are you enjoying what we're doing? Or notice you haven't opened an email in a while. That's probably we'll get into that with recovery sequences. But just these moments where you can detect either exceptional action or you can detect inaction are great opportunities to trigger these automations to send them some sort of experience. One of the ones I really love is one that Matt McGarry shared in one of our past webinars, where they combine that with the polls feature where they have a little, basically they have the autoresponder of like, thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral. And if somebody gives them a thumbs up, they have an automation that triggers based on clicking that link that then sends an automation that says, hey, you liked this edition. Would you like to refer a subscriber our way? And if you do, they're using the referral program. So they have like a different, they have different reward setup. It's like if you refer people, you could basically earn the next level of the reward tier that you're on. So it's a way that like leverages a bunch of these different beehiiv features, polls, referrals, automations to kind of create this flywheel that surfaces their most valuable users. And it's not just, hey, you want to refer? It's like they also have some calls to action. It's like, we'd love to get a quote from you, a testimonial, all of these things that they can then use in their marketing and leverage to grow. And that's like a perfect use case of why we built these tools. But essentially with these features, you can write a series of emails that are automatically going to be sent based on these milestones and criteria. We have a bunch of different automation triggers now in beehiiv, whether it's membership in a segment, whether it's completed a survey form, whether it's clicked, I think the link things comes from the automations. We will have triggers based on links coming very soon. We have webhook based triggers. So if there's a different tool that can fire webhooks, you can pipe those into automations and create any kind of experience there with third-party tools. But the key here is to really understand how users are interacting across the user journey. That's the kind of punchline. And that can be done pretty easily through segmentation. We're working very quickly on enhancing segmentation to be more responsive and to be more real time. But even today, segmenting your audience so that when they meet a certain criteria that shows that they've taken a certain series of actions in that journey is a great way to trigger those drip campaigns. And of course, as with everything we'll talk about today, testing and optimizing the process is critical. You can't just necessarily set it up once, fire and forget. That's obviously better than not setting up anything. So don't necessarily prevaricate over getting it perfect, but always setting up some sort of process to maybe split the audience and send one message to one group and another group, another message to another group. So you can see how users interact over time, whether it's, one type of offer in terms of a, requesting a testimonial or one offer requesting, a referral. You can see which one users are more likely to take. Cool. So with that said, kind of general topics about drip campaigns. Max, do you have any hacks to share?
The only thing is send them daily. Do not spread them out more than one day at a time. The first 7 days, the first 10 days are the most important. And so I see a lot of people with their newsletters send out, one welcome email every week, one welcome email every 3 or 4 days. And so the truth is people signed up for a reason and you need to welcome them as quickly as possible. First impressions are everything. And so if you have good content and if they want to see your greatest hits or if they want to see your poll, like the Matt McGarry example, and if you want them to be engaged via a poll, you got to send it out daily. That would be my pro tip on this one.
Do you have any other automations that you guys have set up aside from like, I know we'll get into some of these like re-engagement campaigns, that you have other ones that you've set up, or that you've seen set up over time that are clever or kind of outside the box thinking?
Yeah. It's actually one of the main reasons I switched from ConvertKit 2 years ago over to beehiiv, because the automations features are so great. So we have a handful of automations set up, but one of my favorites is we create I think it's called Dynamics segment inside of beehiiv. Automatically updates every 12 hours. If someone has gotten more than 12 sends and their open rate is below, I think it's 30 or 35%, my deliverability consultant set it up. But if it's below 35 or 35% open rate and they have more than 12 sends, we automatically push them into a re-engagement campaign. And then if they don't re-engage, we automatically unsubscribe them to make sure that we're consistently staying above that 40% total average open rate. We also have a couple automations where if they click specific links inside of the newsletter, we can send them dedicated emails from an advertiser or promoting a specific event or promoting a specific webinar or ebook or anything else. But the automations tool is absolutely incredible and extremely invaluable for us.
No, that's great to hear, and I think that's actually really useful. We can double click on this later, but I love the idea of setting up that re-engagement campaign to not necessarily just be someone's like not opened at all, or like not clicked at all, because that can be either overly restrictive or, if they haven't seen anything, what's the chance of them actually seeing the re-engagement campaign? But by doing it by just a lower than average open rate, I saw in the chat somebody asked about like how to prevent going to spam. Like that can be a killer way to prevent it. If your audience primarily is getting above that 40% open rate, that's going to improve your deliverability overall. And I think is a really clever way to do it. Probably a little bit more restrictive than some of the other ones where it's just like go 5, 10 emails, whatever, without opening. Identifying that group of lower engagement, not completely unengaged, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't like people talk about it a lot. They're like, oh, if someone hasn't opened it in 5, send them an email, win that back. It's like if someone hasn't opened it in 5, you're likely in spam or you're in promotions. Like you're not going to win that back. I've seen the data. The conversion rate is very, very, very low. So that's why we changed it to what I call like drop offs. Like the moment we think they might end up dropping off, to your point, EJ, like that's when we want to hit them. And so we actually send them to a type form and we say, hey, like we noticed you opened at least 5, right? But you didn't open, all of them. Is there any changes you want to the content? Do we promote ads too much? Like we want the feedback, and regardless of whether we actually look at the feedback or not, we think we've seen by asking them to give their input and feedback, they feel more invested in the community, they feel more invested in the newsletter and the content, and so they're more likely to open it in the future, and therefore their open rates increase as well. So it's more like a drop off, like almost like a abandoned cart type of thing.
Perfect. I mean, so smart to do it like that. Moving along, further kind of going deeper down this rabbit hole of nurturing subscribers. We did touch on this a little bit, so maybe this will be a little bit of a quicker slide. But triggering emails based on subscriber behavior and really drilling down on what those experiences, are that can set up these automations. We've talked about a bunch so far. The options are really limitless. If you have a full stack, if you're using a bunch of different tools, if you're running a course on one platform, or if you're doing something on another platform, just like the options kind of really compound with how you can tie email comms in based on feeding data from these other experiences. But there's a couple different things here. I went over the different triggers that we have within beehiiv that can, trigger some of this behavior. Another one that we've recently introduced greater support for is sending preferences. So some people, they have their main newsletter that they send, maybe they send it daily. And so they want to give an off ramp for some users who maybe feel like they get it too much. And so they want to set it up so that users can opt to receive their emails, maybe not daily, but 3 times a week or maybe once a week. That's one way that subscriber preferences can be leveraged to kind of automate that process and not making you do extra work. I remember, unfortunately, before we had this feature, there was some clients we had where they would send like the entire email to their whole list, but have a separate list entirely that they would just send the one off, once a week to. And that was like one of the biggest, impetuses for us to build this feature out, because that just, seemed like a not the ideal user experience. But there's other ways you can use this. You don't have to just be frequency in terms of how often you can send it. You can do things like have users tell you what they're interested in through something like a survey. beehiiv has survey forms where that you can have, multiple, checkboxes or a drop down of like what they want to hear about, like what topics, what things they find interesting. And then basically when you go to send, you can send to just that group, or you can refine kind of the messages that users are receiving based on that interest. Lastly, we talked about reactivation campaigns already, so we're jumping the gun a bit, but leveraging these different ways of identifying inactive users and as Max was saying, proactively identifying them rather than kind of identifying them after they're kind of lost to you. I have heard some folks, they have a very, very strict, like early kind of right after a user subscribes. Within that, I think this was for a daily newsletter. I don't remember exactly which one, but it was a daily newsletter. And so once a user subscribed, they really looked at that user within the first like week or two and to see their behavior. And it wasn't, their whole re-engagement campaign centered around this like first 14 days or so. It didn't wait for months or weeks and weeks to identify, okay, this person hasn't been opening emails. It was literally like, if you don't open X% of the first emails, you're going to be basically entered into a campaign because you're not necessarily engaging with everything. That may be a little bit kind of on the outlier side because they're a daily newsletter. There's a little bit more rare. If you're sending weekly, it's a little bit harder to get that sample size. I highly recommend, even though re-engagement sounds like or reactivation sounds like kind of maybe a very simple topic or something that's not, super sexy because it's like, I'm trying to recover people who may not be interested. It's always far easier to reactivate and retain a user than to go out and find a new user who also may end up going inactive. So for every user you can recover, there's efficiency in kind of keeping that list active and growing that is more efficient than going out and having to find a new user to replace that. Cool. So personalizing at scale. Personalization is one of the keys to driving engagement. Some deliverability people who say that like when you are able to personalize an email so that the email is like different from different users. So it's like if the email that I'm receiving says, hey, EJ, and the email that Max receives says, hey, Max, that helps deliverability because it's showing that there's kind of unique content. It's not just strictly, batch and blast, but personalizing emails is really, really useful. Outside of technical elements, personalization just makes people feel more connected, and everybody likes being recognized. In that way, personalization through very basic things like a name can be great. Also personalizing by dynamic content. So we have a bunch of tools within beehiiv so you can show and hide content based on whether someone's on the web or on email, whether they're a paid subscriber, whether they're a free subscriber. In the next 6 months or so, we plan on introducing more dynamic content. So you'd be able to actually use people's characteristics from their custom fields and actually show blocks of content based on, what type of characteristics they have on their account. That is coming. That'll be very exciting. But ultimately, I guess the broad punchline is that within automations, you can kind of make these emails feel more one-of-one by using personalization. In beehiiv, the easiest way is through custom fields, as I alluded to a second ago. Under your user data, you have these custom fields that you can pass data into. You can use them when you're collecting data on forms. You can upload them through when you do your uploads if you're migrating from a platform. Things like first name, last name, location. If you have the data to segment by age or gender, you can do that. And ultimately, in the future, having more of this data will help make these content blocks a little bit more dynamic and more useful. But, based on these criteria, there's an infinite number of things you could do. As we've talked about before, segmentation is all based on these custom fields. So not only can you form, custom drips and custom journeys based on characteristics, you can then, within those journeys, customize what each user is seeing to be, really hyper-targeted and speak directly to what they're interested in. Max, I would love to hear kind of any experimentation you guys have done with personalization.
Personalization has always fallen for me in the box of important but not urgent, and so I've never really gotten around to the formal lens or the formal kind of way of personalizing it with names. Just because we send daily and we send to 100,000+ people every day, so yeah, it's actually something that beehiiv has so many amazing tools and we use a lot of them. And again, we switched over from ConvertKit from so many of them, but this is probably a good reminder for me to meet with the team. We actually meet on Tuesdays later today. So I'll meet with the team and say hey, what features are we not using? And is there a way that we can get people's names in there? Because it is written in the first person. It's written from Marketing Max's tone of voice. But by saying hey, EJ, happy Tuesday. Here's what's on the agenda for you, right? Even if it increases open rates 1%, it's probably worth doing. And so figuring out other ways to personalize it and play around with that dynamic content depending on who they are or who they say they are, because we have a very, 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 very detailed onboarding, which I can get into. It's we know what industry they work in and what their job title is and what size company they work at, what content that they want most out of all the different kind of content we create. And so we probably need to map all of that data to different segments in beehiiv and play around with that dynamic content blocks. But yeah, this is probably a good reminder for me to do that. Even I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that doesn't necessarily strictly go into the automation part of it, but just to what you're saying, if you're collecting all of this information about users, even if you're not using it to automate, I mean, one of the most fruitful activities we've seen with clients is using that data to parse out performance. So personalization doesn't just mean necessarily that we have to isn't strictly relegated to the sending part, but if you have industry, I'm sure it'd be a really interesting exercise to create those segments based on industry to see how different users engage, to see how, if one industry has a higher engagement than another. And that can be very informative around future content choices. I might be grasping a little bit, so forgive me if it, falls flat, but it could be interesting to, maybe have I could see a world where a re-engagement campaign filtered by one of these attributes that has some sort of causational effect could be interesting. If you have, finance professionals who are famously super busy, maybe that re-engagement either has to happen more frequently or earlier, or have, more strict criteria or looser criteria compared to, someone else who's, maybe a marketing person on your list. Obviously they're super, tightly aligned with that audience person. So maybe you have higher standards for opening engagement for them before you, trigger those re-engagement things. I think that's where, kind of personalization, I would agree, can be sometimes at the edges. I think the characterization of important but not urgent is a fantastic way to put it. But it's like when you're putting together all of these pieces, it can be one of those really useful things to take something from 95% or 90% to 100%, really increase the value.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was thinking about it when you said it. Like, we take advantage of so many of beehiiv's bells and whistles that are very meaningful to us and provide really great outcomes for us as a business, but also for our advertisers. But I don't think you're grasping at straws in terms of using personalization on the data side of things, because every month we ask all of our advertisers for a list of their leads that we generated for them. And then we actually plug those into our database and see what sources those leads came from. So we see whether it came from a Facebook ad, which Facebook ad, whether it came from a Twitter ad, which Twitter ad, whether it came from my Twitter link in bio, whether it came from a specific Twitter thread, whether it came from some of our like co-regs, like boosts and partnerships and everything else. And that way we're able to kind of double down on like which sources we want to invest in more, because we want to get our advertisers more leads the next month. And so if we see one advertiser is getting most of their leads from Facebook ads, like our subscribers that come from Facebook ads, then we'll double down on Facebook ads the next month. But to your point, we should probably be cross-referencing that data, not just with the source UTM in the column, but also with their responses for what industry they work in, or what size company they are, or even what role they are, so we know what roles to go after and what kind of content to create more, or what better type of content to create for more of the people who are becoming leads based on their role. Yep. So forgive me for going too much into the weeds here, but yeah, that's how I think about it.
No problem. And I think one of those things that we didn't really go deeply into, but I have mentioned before, like surveys. Our survey feature is an incredibly powerful tool for this. It integrates into the onboarding process. So when we say onboarding, the kind of built-in flow that beehiiv has that is accessible to users through the settings is you have somebody subscribe, they give you your email, and then there's a bunch of these like toggles where you can toggle on to customize like the order in which they see these next steps. But there's subscribe. There's toggling on it's called boosts and recommendations. So you can like show boosts and recommendations. And then we have the ability to show different experiences. So if you have multiple newsletters, you can show those. We also have the ability to show a survey. And that's one of the most critical parts of the onboarding experience that I think a lot of publishers actually overlook, in my opinion, in that when somebody's giving you their email, they've already subscribed. So you've already got them. There's very little to lose by continuing to basically ask them for a little bit more information. There's the concept of like, sunk cost, where it's like they've already invested the time to submit the email. What's just another couple more fields? And it can be really, really helpful because it's the best time you're going to get that data. If you include a link to like have them give you the information later, it's a lot easier to not click that link. But if it's right in front of them, it's very easy for them to add something like name, email, industry, gender, age, depending on like what your audience is like, whether they're willing to give that data. All of these different things that if you capture at the beginning, can do that. And you can set those up very, very easily. Survey forms integrate natively with custom fields, so that data that you collect, like first name and last name, can be used immediately in the personalization. And then the personalizations themselves do have the ability for fallbacks. So it's like when you add the first name, if you don't have the user's first name, make it very easy to put in a placeholder, like in the example on the screen, hi first name or hi friend, if you don't have their first name. So just functionally, if you're curious on like how you might do some of these things, we have tons of videos on how to leverage each of those. What you were talking about, Max, around ads and reporting back to advertisers is super useful and very relevant to what I'm going to go over here. So, as I said at the beginning of the call, I kind of foreshadowed a little bit. Automation isn't just about what you can do with beehiiv, but there's also external tools that can really amplify your automation strategies, across different tools. Whether it's, Facebook, when you have a subscriber, using a no-code tool like Make to send that conversion to Facebook's conversion API, so you get tighter conversion tracking for your ads, or some of the other use cases that I'll go over here. For no-code automation, Make is a very user-friendly, very affordable option that we have a very good partnership with. Zapier is a very famous option as well. We have a partnership with them. Both of these platforms, we have very robust connections that I think in real time we keep them updated. So I think at any given time, anything you can do with the API, like if you were a developer, you can do with these no-code tools. They're very robustly built, and they help you basically connect all of these different tools. I've never come across any tool. I'm sure there are out there, but between these tools, we integrate with like tens of thousands of different platforms. So I have not yet come across a tool that we don't integrate with using these capabilities, these mechanisms. But just some ideas for this: you can sync if you are using like an external CRM. If you're a part of a larger business, you can sync your CRM. You can create workflows to post on social media. You can trigger specific user sequences based on external behavior. All of these things are really, really easily set up using those no-code tools. Second, and this I think is where I was getting to with the ads, is data enrichment. So there are these tools, companies like ZoomInfo, People Data Labs. There's millions of, not millions, but there's a lot of these different tools that if you send them an email, they'll charge you a cent of 10 cents, whatever. It decreases with volume, but they charge you a small fee, very, very nominal fee. And what they'll return to you is data that they have about that subscriber. So, you can basically have a subscriber come in, and this is the example that's shown on the screen. You can have an example, a subscriber come in, that email sent to something like ZoomInfo, People Data Labs, etData. And then if etData has a data set about them, it'll return to you via something like Make or Zapier, a payload that has stuff like gender. And, if I name everything, it'd sound really, really creepy because they actually have so much data, but, gender, age, household, all of these different things that, some might be useful, some might not be, but, can really kind of provide insight. Where I like to go with this is if you have, gender is one of the ones that's most common. So if you were to enrich with gender, it's very, very easy then for you to go to advertisers and say, hey, my emails go out, they go to X thousands of people. I have this open rate, so it's this many eyeballs seeing my newsletter each week. And I know that, 60% of my audience is male, 40% are female. I know that 60% are in households of 4 people or more, meaning like family size, and that's very important to advertisers who want to reach, consumers and so forth. There's a lot of things you can do with enriching this data. I will say it can be expensive depending on your list. So I'm looking, thinking about Max and that 100,000 person list. It can be a bit of an investment, but if you are just starting out and it's the type of thing where, it's going to cost just a couple cents per subscriber, as you grow, one, there's ways to recoup that cost with some of beehiiv's monetization tools and not even to say of ads. If you can get to a point where you can give much more specific tactical data to advertisers sooner, it can really, really benefit, your monetization outcomes. Lastly, LLMs, or kind of the generative AI that we see so pervasively in society today, can help for research. Tools like Perplexity can help for content. Things like beehiiv AI, powered by OpenAI's 4.0 model, where you can, I don't like to say generate content, but I'd say enhance content. So you can change the tone, you can change the length, shorten the length, make it more concise, spell check, translate to different languages. All of these different things are, make it way more accessible than ever to provide these additional kind of enhancements to your existing workflow. Max, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we enrich our data with a tool that we found to be less expensive than a lot of them. A lot of them are like $1 per record. And so to your point, I'm certainly not spending $100K a year to do this. But we found a few less expensive tools. And then what we do is every quarter we shoot out a survey and we just ask all the questions that we think are relevant to our specific advertisers. And then what we do with our recurring advertisers is we go to them and say, hey, do you want us to ask a question for you for our audience? Mm-hmm. And they appreciate that because they're getting more data. And then also the data leads to better outcomes for them, which leads to more money for us. So if you don't have a huge budget to use a tool like Megahit is the one that I know a lot of like bigger newsletters use. If I may drop other tool names here, EJ, if that's okay.
Yeah, 100%. Anything you want to drop. Yeah.
Yeah, but like Megahit.app is the one that everyone uses. That can be upwards of like $1 per contact. So that's really expensive. We use Reverse Contact, which is decent. It has like a 30-40% match rate. But again, like nothing is as good as first party data. So every quarter we're working on our Q4 survey now. And then again, taking this full circle, we offer a $250 Amazon gift card for one of the people that fill out the survey. So the more you can do to incentivize people to fill out the survey, the more responses you're going to get. It's like 10x. It's not just like, oh, we'll get a couple more. It's like literally like 10x whatever it would have been without it. So yeah, enriching data is super valuable. And then I have a beehiiv enterprise plan and I have a Zapier enterprise plan. I use Zapier to integrate a million different tools with beehiiv, from Unbounce to Airtable to Google Sheets and a bunch of other tools. So yeah, huge fan of Zapier, and beehiiv makes it super
amazing.
Easy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that story brings up if you're in the audience and you haven't seen the webinar we did last week with Daniel Burke was the guest. He runs a very local, very, very hyper targeted local newsletter, but he had a perfect example, very similar, where in the city that he's located, I won't share it because he likes to keep it a little under wraps because he doesn't want, external people signing up to it, but he had an advertiser reach out for a local dog grooming business and was like, hey, does your audience have pets? And that was nothing, he'd never thought to ask that. He had never considered, that as like an onboarding question or like something that, he would necessarily want or need to know about. And so he added a poll question. He was like, do you have any pets? Do you have a dog or whatever? And the survey responses were overwhelming that like, yes, his readers did have pets, and that led him to running an ad with that groomer. And then it actually, because it's so local and hyper targeted, he knows his audience so well, that led to an incredible response. They booked a bunch of, appointments. And so now he has like a long-term relationship with them. I guess telling that story, it doesn't necessarily strictly have the connection to automation, but it just goes to show that like having that data, it can never be said too often that, having that data can be incredibly useful kind of regardless of the size. You don't have to be a massive 100,000 subscriber list to be able to take advantage of subscriber data. You can have a couple thousand, and being super targeted, knowing about your users can be really, really helpful. Jumping to our playbooks. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these because we are running up on the last 10 minutes. I want to have some time to get in a couple Q&As as well as give Max a chance to talk about what he does. But basically, first playbook, creating a lead magnet offer. One of those things that's a very popular topic in digital marketing and across the web, but create some sort of lead magnet. This can be a video, a guide, a deck, a template, can be anything of value for your audience. Set it up so that upon subscribe, users, you survey them to learn about their interests, but upon subscribe, you send them this lead magnet and build that personalized welcome series to basically get that stuff. The lead magnet there is like that carrot to get them to sign up. If it's a downloadable asset, we have the ability to provide a download widget within the email itself. It's something I think that's relatively, unique to beehiiv as a marketing tool. I think there's certainly others that do it, but you can literally say like have a little download call to action within the newsletter itself. Otherwise, if it's a different type of asset, you can have a link where they can go and download it, or a link to like a unlisted video on YouTube. But that can be kind of like Max is talking about, just one variation of like a carrot to drive some engagement. The next one would be premium upgrades. So going through your list as you're sending and segmenting your subscribers by the highest open and click rates. Could also do this with that idea that Matt McGarry presented of like, users who give you the thumbs up, or who have the most referrals. Anything that shows like affinity for your newsletter and your brand. Identify the most engaged users and then send them an exclusive offer to start a premium free trial. So beehiiv offers the ability to offer free trials where you can either collect credit card up front or just give them free access for 1 day, 7 days, a month, and then convert them to paid. But that trial period can also be really helpful for convincing them. You can also do no trial period, but identifying those most engaged users and then setting up an automation to pitch them on a premium offering is a great strategy for driving premium subscriptions through beehiiv, which we have very, very strong, robust tools around. A great way to monetize. Third, list cleaning. I'm not going to go into this. We've talked about this a ton. So keeping your list super clean. You've heard from Max, you've heard from me, the different approaches to do that. One of the things that we didn't necessarily talk about was like how you actually do the segment. We have the ability to create like an unengagement trigger, but the other way to do it would be, have a link in your email. So instead of just saying, hey, if you don't, do anything, you're going to be, click this link to stay subscribed. That's like a very popular way. Or, if you don't take an action, we're going to churn you from the list. But that's another way to kind of help with your deliverability rates, as long as if you're keeping them super tight. I've seen open rates at like 5,000-10,000 of like 70-80%. It's incredibly rare, but like these people are super, super strict on who they allow to be on the list, and they benefit from that cleanliness. Lastly, kind of what we just talked about, enriching data. So use a no-code tool to automate an integration between beehiiv and ZoomInfo. When a new subscriber signs up, pass their data through ZoomInfo to append demographic information like gender, and then use this enriched data to segment your list and provide advertisers with the demographic information they're requesting. So I did cover that one before, but you'll have this now in the guide. So we have my colleague Tony. You guys can't see or hear him, but I think he is here as our producer. Tony, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind looking at the form and queue us up with like, 2 or 3 questions that are relevant and, that we can answer effectively? Cool. So the question is, with data vendors, how do you evaluate, which ones to work with? So I will give my answer. I personally with beehiiv have only run like a very small scale test just to prove viability with a tool called @data, but there's a ton of them out there. There's @data, there's Unbounce, which is owned by ZoomInfo, there's ZoomInfo, there's the ones that Max mentioned. Actually, I have a buddy, very close friend that works at ZoomInfo, and in talking to him when I was getting a quote for a different project, he actually recommended a process of basically taking a list that you go to a bunch of different vendors and say, here's a sample, 100,000, 10,000 emails, and saying, hey, like, give us what you have on these users so we can see and basically compare which vendors have more relevant data. And the idea being like different vendors will have different data. It's not all the same. It's naturally all fairly similar, but like the technology that goes into it is where differentiation happens. And so he recommended basically running this test and basically letting them prove to you which source provides the best data. And of course, maybe you pay a premium for that better data. So then of course price comes into it. They'll give you pricing and you can basically compare pricing against match rates. Max, would you do anything differently there?
No, my comment was going to be the same. You could basically go to all these different tools and say, hey, if I give you a list of 1,000, will you give me a sample, and then give the same list to each one of them and see which data comes back the best, what you think is the most accurate. Data match rates are really important. So some tools will have like 30% match rate, some will have 80, and then you have to make a judgment call. Would you rather have an 80% match rate, but the data is mediocre and kind of old? Maybe it's like 3 companies ago from their LinkedIn, they scraped is the data that they give you. So that'd be the first comment. And the other comment is like, for a lot of you guys, when I was reading the comments during the program, during the session here, a lot of you guys, it seemed like we're just getting started. So I wouldn't spend your budget on data enrichment tools right away. If you're, under 10,000 subscribers, run a $250 Amazon gift card giveaway, to get that first party data. It's going to be a lot better bang for your buck, and the data will be 100% accurate. And it's a lot easier way to get started if you're just getting started.
No doubt. 100%. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Yeah. Don't get caught up in like feeling like you need, if you're kind of just starting out, the fanciness of that tools. Yeah. First party data through surveys will get you super far. And then it's like, when you get to the point where you're doing more independent ad deals, which might only be when you're at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 subscribers is where it might be more useful. Yeah. I mean, so, deliverability broadly it plays, a huge role in this. It's like the infrastructure sending the automations is not any different than the infrastructure that's sending your main sends. And so it comes down to the basics, making sure that you're avoiding spammy words in the subject line or in the body of the content. There's a bunch of resources that you can subscribe, like spam list, blacklist words, or, spam blocker, blacklist words, whatever you want to call it, and just make sure that like you don't have that in there. I remember one kind of funny example. This person reached out to me very early in the company and they're like, hey, my welcome email is going to spam. I have no idea why. And it was like, I was like, well, I don't think we're having any deliverability issues right now. Like, what's the deal? And then after doing all these different things, I just asked them to send me the preview. And it was literally like, claim your free gift card, exclamation mark. And I was like, well, I wish I had just done that immediately, because like there's your problem. Like, it's that's like pretty much as spammy as you can get in terms of raising the hackles of the spam filters. So sometimes it's as simple as that, but in terms of really getting scientific about it, really testing your subject lines is going to be the best thing. This is a case where, if you're sending one send out, then obviously your subject line is going to change from post to post because it's going to be unique with every send. Your automations offer the unique opportunity to really do an extended test where you can really get much more scientific about it over time, because it, is the same message being sent repeatedly as your list grows.
Yeah, a couple like quick hits on deliverability. Number one, even if you don't have a business newsletter, you should ask people in your sign up page to sign up with their work email, because most people's work email don't have a promotions tab. That's just their main inbox. So no matter what the content is, people are going to check their work email a million times more than they're going to check their personal email. So always ask for that. That's a little pro tip. Another one is, EJ mentioned like words like free, words like discount definitely get blacklisted really quickly. The other tactic, the other strategy is in that welcome email. We kind of touched on this earlier. The first thing should be to respond, asking people to respond to the email. And then you can also tell people to add your email to their contact list. That is the easiest way to get you out of spam. And then again, if it's really important to you, if your deliverability is not great, incentivize them. Say, hey, send us a screenshot of you adding our email to your contact list, and we'll give you a free ebook, or we'll give you a discount code to some advertiser, or we'll give you a $5 Starbucks gift card, or whatever it is. So those are 2 or 3 quick tips there. I do have to run in a minute. Sorry, guys.
We'll make this super quick. Max, where can people find you online, and what do you do outside of co-hosting webinars?
Well, first of all, EJ, thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of beehiiv. I'm an investor. I am an enterprise user or kind of early evangelist. I'm always on Twitter telling people to use it over a bunch of competitors. But yeah, I run growthdaily.com, which is a suite of newsletter tool or newsletters, not tools, newsletters. And then I also have a handful of different other kind of consulting businesses. One of them is I actually do consult with newsletters about how to grow their list and monetize with advertisers. So if you have any questions on that, you can find me on Twitter. It's just Marketing Max. You can shoot me a DM or you can email me at max@marketingmax.io. Happy to answer questions, big or small, over DMs, over emails. But yeah, I'm just trying to help make marketing easier for as many people as possible and help make the newsletter journey as easy for as many people as possible. So thanks for having me, and hopefully looking forward to being on a few more if I didn't steal too much of EJ's thunder.
No, that was amazing, and you're certainly welcome back. What a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for your time, as well as the audiences, but that was incredible. Couldn't ask for anything more. While we finish up, I just do need to plug the beehiiv Slack community. So if you are a paid user of beehiiv, you have access to our premium paid only Slack community. So this is like 3,000 active publishers, 20 plus channels across, how to do things, product feature requests, things like, recommendations, get to know each other, cross recommendations. There's a bunch of different things that it's very active, dozens, hundreds of posts a day, really is a great way to connect with other folks who are just like you at similar stages in the journey, regardless of what stage you're at. Can't more highly recommend it. It's a very, very strong resource for people, especially if you're getting started, but also if you are kind of further along. You can send, a link to a post and say, what do people think? How could, tear down my newsletter or whatever. There's a bunch of stuff that people get. I need to work on my pitch for that, clearly. I'll make that more concise. That'll be my homework for next week.
You're killing it. Don't worry. That was great. You killed it.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time. If you want to look at past newsletters, maybe Tony can drop the link to our past recordings on the blog, but it's blog.beehiiv.com/t/webinars, or you just click the webinars content tag from blog.beehiiv.com. All of our past ones are listed there. Max, can't thank you enough. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to having you back. And until next time, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Crush the day.